Victoria, thank you for being with us today. Now, we already knew Archie wasn't going to be a prince, so why is this story coming up again? What's new?
There have been stories recently that suggest that Prince Charles does plan to change things when he becomes king and that he would limit titles in line with having a slimmed down monarchy. But Robert Lacey, in his book, which does seem to be very well sourced, doesn't seem to think this is likely. He seems to think that it won't be a priority for Charles when he becomes king, and therefore things will be left as they are, which means that when he becomes king, Archie and Lily will be able to use those prince and princess titles if they want to. One of the things that has perhaps been confused is that this issue of having a slimmed down monarchy has been conflated with this issue of titles. And in some ways they are linked, because obviously it's the working royals who use the titles and who are working members of the royal family. However, actually, you can have a slimmed down monarchy in terms of numbers of working royals without changing anything to do with the titles. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, for example, have royal titles, but they're not working royals. The two things don't have to be connected. So suggestions that Prince Charles wants a slimmed down monarchy don't automatically have to go hand in hand with him changing anything to do with titles.
And at the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, there was quite a bit said about what went on between William and Harry. Well, apparently not much. It turns out that that may have been intentional.
Yeah, this is interesting because, of course, around the time of the funeral, we all saw William and Harry and Kate walking together for that brief period when they left St George's Chapel. And then there was multiple reports that were not contradicted, as far as I'm aware, that there had been a long conversation between Charles and Harry and William following the funeral. But in the updated version of his new book, Robert Lacey seems to provide a different narrative to that. Now, it's important to say that his book does seem to be very well sourced. He seems to have spoken to people that he didn't speak to for the first edition of the book to shed new light on historical events, and also to shed light on some of the events that have happened since the book's publication. Obviously, the funeral is one of those things. And he seems to have spoken to a friend of William as one of these new sources. And what he says is that William and Kate did not speak at length to Harry after the funeral, and the reason was that there were concerns over whether or not those conversations would find their way into the public domain. And obviously this follows the Sussexes having been very vocal over the last year, speaking in interviews about conversations that have been held behind closed doors, decisions that have been made behind closed doors, and also some of their high-profile friends and acquaintances also talking about this publicly as well. So it does make sense, but it's interesting because it provides a very different narrative to the one that was very, very widely reported following the funeral.
And of course, we spoke about this recently, the speculation about whether the name Lilibet was protected by the Sussexes before they had that conversation with the Queen. Now seems it was.
Well, the domain names of Lilibet Diana and Lily Diana were purchased by the couple just before or around the time that their daughter was born, and they've confirmed this. And it does seem that this happened before they spoke to the Queen about their daughter's name, because they've also said in separate statements via their spokesperson that conversation took place after their daughter was born, and the Queen was one of the first people that Harry called. Now, the Sussexes, have been quite open about this, and a spokesperson has said that they did purchase a number of domains of potential names, emphasising there was multiple domains, it seems, purchased. And the reason that they did this was to protect against the name that was eventually chosen being exploited by others. It obviously does make sense, because once the name is announced, any domain name with that name can potentially become very lucrative, and clearly they didn't want those domain names to be owned by other people. So it is interesting, but it actually doesn't really, I think, change the emphasis when it comes to the Queen's approval or not of the name. Clearly, had she vocalised an objection, they would have been able to choose something else and just not used those domain names with those names. But I think it will be interesting to see if they actually use the domain names in the future, or if they just keep hold of them to stop other people from using them. So I think that's one of the things that we'll sort of see pan out over the next few years, if there is actually a plan for these domain names now, or if it is simply to prevent other people from exploiting the use of them.
That's all we have for you on our YouTube show. But to see the rest of this episode, including some more fascinating royal revelations, head to www.mailplus.co.uk/royals, or click the link on screen now.